Everyone. Welcome to the COVID-19 and the Built Environment Forum. My name is Ben Amick, and I will be your moderator on Thursday. Dean Williams sends his regrets, and he hopes that you will enjoy this informative presentation today. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our co-sponsors, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Arkansas, the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce, and the Fay W. Bozeman College of Public Health. I would also like to thank the University of Arkansas for Health Sciences, who is bringing this website to you. This forum will follow the same format on all 3 days. Our 3 speakers are Luc Luong, Elliot Gall, and Cynthia Lewis. Our speakers are nationally recognized experts in their field. Ms. Lewis is the moderator of today's session. Each session is being recorded and can be accessed for viewing and sharing at a later time. Now I will turn the session over to Cindy.
Thank you, Ben. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Let me add my welcome to the first in our series of 3 presentations for this week. As Ben stated, I'll be the facilitator, moderator for the sessions today and tomorrow, and then on Thursday, I actually have the pleasure of presenting. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. We would like our sessions to be as interactive as possible, given the format that we're using. If at any time you have a question for our speaker today, please type it into the Q&A section. You'll see the Q&A link located at the bottom of your screen. We will try to address the questions as they come in, but if we're running short on time, we'll hold the questions until the conclusion of the presentation. Any questions that we're not able to get to during our time together, we'll send to our speaker and post the questions and answers on the School of Public Health website. If you think of a question after the presentation, which I know a lot of us do, you can always send that question in as well. So let's get started. Our speaker today is Luc Leong, PE and Lead Fellow. Mr. Leong is the director of MEP, which stands for Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing, and Sustainable Engineering Studio for Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, or SOM. Mr. Leong leads his team in attaining the highest levels of human, environmental, and financial performance. He has won multiple awards, including 8 Excellence in Engineering Awards from the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, or ASHRAE. 2 Beyond Green Awards from the National Institute of Building Sciences, and several Sustainable Design Awards from the American Institute of Architects. Mr. Leong is a LEED Fellow. He is also a Centennial Fellow at Pennsylvania State University Architectural Engineering Department, a member of the ASHRAE Environmental Health Committee, chairman of the Building Pressure Committee, member of the Chicago Committee on High-Rise Buildings, member of the AIA Large Firm Roundtable Sustainable Committee, member of the Sustainable Committee on the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat, part-time professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, a member of the Chicago Sister City Program with China, and member of the editorial teams for CTBUH Natural Ventilation in High-Rise Office Buildings and the ASHRAE Handbooks on Tall Buildings, among other publications. And he says he has a real job too. Mr. Leong projects include the Burj Khalifa, currently the world's tallest man-made structure. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Leong to get started today.
Thank you for the introduction. And yes, I do hold a day job, though I have a few habits on my own. And thank you for the introduction to ASHRAE, which lead right into this here. Yes, now mentioned earlier that if you have a question, you can actually send to this email address. So if you have any question regarding what we're talking about today, COVID, feel free to drop an email to this address and we'll reply to you online. And the introduction talk about what is ASHRAE, so I'm not gonna dive into there, but I do wanna let you know that we do have a series of these guidelines online, which you're seeing on the screen from healthcare, residential, multifamily, commercial, schools, and universities that you can look at to see what are the measures that we should do for COVID. So those are the background for ASHRAE. Now, what we're gonna do today is we're going to look at a few research, and then we're going to dive into winter is coming. What are the things we can do in there? And finally, we'll look at some of the HVAC measures and make us all become a little expert of our little environment in COVID. So start with research. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. The disease is COVID-19. Now, what you are seeing, this red, not red, the black circle is if that's the size of a human hair, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is that little white dot in the middle. The actual size of the virus itself is smaller than 1 micron. You do not have to worry about what 1 micron is. Just kind of remember 1 micron, that unit, because we'll refer to micron in the future. It's a lot of decimal places after a meter. So that's 1 micron, very small. Now there are 3 ways that you can get contracted with the disease in a general way. One is through the air, one is through contact, and the last one is through surfaces, which Professor Gao will probably dive into more technical detail tomorrow. But what I want to talk to you today, first we have to know the difference between inside 6 feet and outside 6 feet. Why is that important? Because inside 6 feet, the droplets are larger. And then it takes seconds to minutes for it to drop onto the ground. And the size is bigger than 5 micron in general, okay? Now, but once it's beyond 6 feet, it's a little different. The size of these particles will be smaller than 5 micron, and it's because of that it stay suspended in the air for hours. How many hours? Well, if it's 3 micron, it's 1.5 hours. If it's 12 hours, if it's 1 micron, it's 12 hours. So you get the idea. So they stay in the air a lot longer if they are small. Why is that distinguished is important? And here's why. Because from the X-ray position is what we feel is, or from the evidence we saw out there, is the SARS-CoV-2, the virus, is sufficient likely that it can stay airborne in a longer time and infect people beyond the 6 feet. So for the longest time, you probably heard CDC said, we are really concerned about the infection inside the 6 feet. And because the majority of the infection happened inside the 6 feet. But there are evidence out there that we believe the disease can potentially spread beyond the 6 feet. So that's something of concern here. And we'll show you the evidence why. Now, CDC actually come out in October 5th and changed their position. They said now they believe the virus can spread more than 6 feet. More interesting is they believe the virus can infect people shortly after a person left an area that is infected with the virus. And that is kind of important because now they are saying, even if you may not have direct contact with the person, but if the person were there, but you walk into the space that the sick person were in the space, there's a chance that you get infected. Why do they say that? Now, this research here indicate the virus actually alive or still active. In this case, it's about 16 feet away from a patient, okay? So that's one of the evidence we find in recent research. And in this medical building here, the virus was found in the ceiling grill, the air grills, and it was also found 56 meters, a little bit short of 200 feet into the ductwork. So not only they were in the grills, in the air grills, but they were deep into the ductwork, right? This is more interesting in the sense that the Dutch nursing home, they find the virus not only in the ductwork, but in the air handling unit and in the filters of 4 ventilation boxes. Now, also should be noted that in this case, people were wearing masks, except during dining time in the facility. but all the 21 residents and also the staff, they were all infected with COVID-19. In fact, it's so bad that the Dutch government actually changed their ventilation system after this event. In this study here is University of Oregon. They find the virus inside the air handling unit in a hospital, multiple locations of the air handling unit. Now they find the virus in the filter, not surprisingly, but they also find the virus in the final filter. Now, which is interesting because the final filter is actually very high efficient, as you can see here. Anything below 5 micron, it can do 90 to 85% filtration, not 100%. So not surprisingly, some did get through, and they can find it in the supply dampers too. So this research tells us that the virus can potentially get into the air handling unit where it distributes air to the building. Now, the other thing you should know is a lot of people say, well, the frequent touch surfaces, right? But in this study, and actually there's a few other studies similar to this, is they find actually more virus on the floor than the frequent touch area of the, the doorknobs, the bars, the railings, and all that stuff. And when you think about it, it shouldn't be a surprise because when you talk or sneeze, it's droplets, right? Those elements do drop onto the floor. So you shouldn't be surprised there's quite a bit of element on the floor. Now, but if you are like me, who have kids at home and have a habit of eating off the floor because the kids keep dropping stuff on the floor for you to eat, now may not be the time for you to do that, especially when you are in the public areas. Now, this is a case in China that is very informing, and here's why. Now, note the AC unit on the right, but the AC unit has no outside air, or it doesn't have a really strong filter. So look what happened now. So the person A1 has the virus, and he didn't know it. And then the other people turning red were infected with the virus. And then they were also at different tables. In this case, the AC unit helped to push the virus beyond the 6 feet that CDC say is is the droplet transmission. The majority of the transmission happened inside there. So here's the diagram of the restaurant, and you can see the people got infected. The longest person is actually 4.6 meters away. That's like, almost 15 feet away from the infected person. And also the 3 tables in the back, right? So, and from this example here, you can see when you're in confined environment and the air handling unit, or the HVAC system, if it doesn't has a good filter or outside air, that is not helpful. That could be an issue. So bear in mind that confined environment, no good outside air for circulation and no good filter, that is not good. Similar to this case here, in this case is actually a bus. The index patient is the one in red color. You can see the patient actually infected a bunch of people inside the bus. It's about an hour bus ride. And the person that's furthest away from the index patient is actually 7 rows behind the patient. So it's also another case to show that when you are in a confined environment, not that good. You could have issues. All right, those conclude our research. In summary, what we are trying to say is, though majority of the infection does happen in close distance, but there are evidence showing the infection can happen beyond 6 feet. In fact, in a confined environment, it's actually not a good place to be when there's no good outside air and no good filter. So let's see what our winter holds. Now, this is where we are with the COVID cases start spiking up. Will it do that in the wintertime? Chances are it will. Why is that? Well, number one is the rule of 1,000. What is the rule of 1,000? The rule of 1,000 saying a pollutant released indoor is about 1,000 times more likely to be inhaled than outdoor. So as winter comes, more of us spend time indoor. The rule of 1,000 is not working to our favor because it's highly likely that we're going to inhale something indoor than outdoor. And then the 7322 versus 2, that's a case, there's a research in China. They study like over 7,000 cases. What they find is majority of them, 7,322, were infected indoor. There are only 2 people get infected outdoor when they were too close to each other. Now, the other thing is wintertime, there's no sun. What you're looking at right now is the UV index, meaning the sun. Even the UV index of 1, right? Pretty low. The 90% virus decay time is 77 minutes. So meaning majority of the virus, 90% of them will decay within an hour plus. When you are 70 degree and 25% relative humidity, okay? Now what happened if you have no sun? We're gonna do that. We're gonna move the UV index to 0. Remember, 77 minutes was one UV index. Boom! What happened? Look at the 90% virus decay time. It increased to 1,874 minutes. It's 31 hours. So in those long dark winter nights, the virus can stay active and decay much slower. So that's another reason why it's not working to our advantage. Now, what if you can potentially do something about it, right? Let's say if we can increase the humidity. Remember, we are 70 degree, 25% relative humidity. Now we have no UV light. But let's say if we put in, okay, let's try temperature first. We increase the temperature to 78 degree. Now notice that significantly decreased the virus decay time from 1,800 plus minute to 300 plus minute, almost a 6-time reduction. So warmer is better for us. How about relative humidity? So let's go back to 70 degree, 25% RH, 1,800 minutes, right? No UV light. Now let's say if we change the relative humidity, we're going to move it from 25% to higher, just like that. What do we see? Also, we see almost a 6 times reduction in the decay time by just moving it to 35% relative humidity. So warmer helps, more humid helps. Now, some of you may think, okay, I got an idea. I'm going to heat up my space to kill the virus. Okay. Well, it's going to, number one, cost you a lot of energy. Number two, even if you heat the place up to 86 degrees, like what we saw up here on the above, that's air. That's all the stuff in the air. If you heat up the air to 86 degree, okay, it will take about 100 minutes on the decay time, 90% of the virus. So it does take a long time to do that, even if you heat up the space to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, but look at the surfaces, just in the air we just talked to. Now look at the surfaces at the bottom. The surface, even if you heat it to 90 degrees, it will take 87 hours, 87 hours to get 99% decay. 90% decay, it takes 6.5 hours. So it still takes a long time to use heat to kill the virus when they are in the 80, 90 degree range. So whether that's a really good strategy, you really have to be a little bit careful about that. Now, this is all Homeland Security calculator that you can go to. The slides will be shared with you later on. So if you didn't catch the website, that's fine. Later on, you can grab the reference of the website and go play around with it. Humidity is important. We just saw that the virus actually decay a lot faster when the humidity is slightly higher. In fact, 40 to 60% humidity is what prefer. As you can see, it has much less issue with a whole bunch of contaminants in the air. And in this case, especially SARS-CoV-2, the below chart indicate is specifically for SARS-CoV-2 at about 60%. It actually bottoms out in terms of its active time. So humidity helps. Now, but a lot of our buildings do not have humidifiers, or humidifying the building entirely to 40 to 60% could have condensation issue in the winter time. So we'll look at how to do that later. Now, why is humidity help? One is the cilia in our respiratory system. When the humidity is higher, the cilia actually move a lot faster to get the stuff out from our respiratory system versus the humidity is low. It moves really, really slow to get the stuff out. That's why humidity is important, because the cilia movement will help to get the stuff out when it's more humid. And also, when you are on surfaces, lower the temperature and lower the humidity also reduce the decay time. What we just talked about was when the stuff is in the air. Now it's also true for the stuff on the surfaces, okay? Now, if you cannot humidify the whole building, and there are people that are more vulnerable in your home or in your restaurant or in your office, provide them with a local humidifier so that they can get to a higher humidity level locally without impacting the entire building on condensation. So the other thing is, okay, wintertime, when we go back to the office, what about that scary elevator ride with some strangers and they may have COVID? Well, it turns out if the person, we are in this modeling here, we actually assume there are one patient in there talking with COVID, the other 3 people have no COVID. But notice the risk is so low. It's only 0.02% with no mask, with your elevator exhaust on. So it's a good thing to turn on the elevator exhaust fan. Why is the risk is so low? Because the time of elevator ride is usually short. Remember, CDC said 15 minutes of exposure to a person, right? So within that 1 or 2 minutes elevator ride, your risk is actually very low. But remember now, this is accumulative. So if you expose in an elevator for 2 minutes, and then later on you expose to another person for another 13, 14 minutes, then they start adding up. But the elevator by itself is low. Now, but that is provided nobody sneezes inside the elevator. If somebody decided they're gonna sneeze, guess what? Then all bets are off. But if you are all if you are all wearing masks, the risk is even lower. Okay, it's super low. It's like 0.005 with one person just gently talking inside the elevator. So it's not that scary in the elevator, except somebody sneeze. So that's why the mask will help. How about the office in the winter time? How scary it is. Now we did another study to show you. This is using a typical conventional office density. We use Chicago as a study case, but it doesn't vary too much in different cities, given the assumption is the same. What we find out is if nobody wearing masks, the chance of getting infected is more than 1%. Oh, you may be like, wait, 1%? Oh, that's not bad. Well, you know what? If 100 people go to work, one person come back home with COVID, it's still not that good. Now, this is given a MERV 8 filter, which is a conventional filter with no enhancement and nobody wearing masks. Once you have people wearing masks, then it will be a little different. Actually, before we go there, okay, let's say if we just increase it to outside air or MERV 13 filter. So if you increase the filter efficiency or you increase it to 100% outside air, your risk is a lot lower, lower than 1% in this office building we study with those assumptions. Now, when the assumption changes, it does change. So, but this is given one person infected gently talking, right? That's what happened. You know, with MERV 13 filter, It's very close to 100% outside air. But you know what? We do not, and I say it again, we do not in this winter need 100% outside air. As long as we got a MERV 13 filter, we are actually performing pretty well. Look at the orange bar on the screen. That's MERV 13 filter. Look at the gray bar on the screen. That's 100% outside air. 100% outside air is slightly better, but it's not different by that much. Once you have this provision, they are very similar. So in this winter, you can keep the MERV 13 filter without going to 100% outside air. Now, of course, if you wear mask, your risk is also much lower now. In fact, it's only 25% of without mask. So wearing mask definitely help reduce it significantly. Now, we are not even assuming you have an N95 mask. N95 mask. This is just a normal cloth mask that we will wear. It's about 50% efficient, we are assuming. What about, I don't have all the people in the office. Well, once you reduce the density of the people, in this case, we reduce it by 50%. Say an office only 50% occupied. You reduce the risk almost by 50%, as you can see on the screen. Finally, what if you have 50% density reduction, only 50% of the people go back, and also everybody wear masks? Now your risk is really low. So the point here is, it's not that risky to go back to the office given where we are right now as a nation in terms of the infection rate and the assumptions we have, especially if the density of the office is lower and everybody's wearing masks. Okay, so this is not so bad. So that's our winter section. Now we finally will come to the last section. What about our HVAC system? Now that we know the virus can potentially get into the HVAC system, what do we need to do? Okay, this is the section that we want to make sure everybody come out of this, become a little expert in the HVAC system for this winter. So how do we do that? A few things you need to pay attention to. Once you grab it, these few rules, you will be that little expert. Doesn't take much. Very simple. Number one, make sure you got the code require outside air. It doesn't have to be 100%. All you need is the minimum outside air per code requirement, but it's important, okay? Make sure you have that. Then the second thing, MERV 13 filter or above. Make sure you have the proper filter. As you saw earlier, if you have MERV 8 filter, it is not as efficient as MERV 13 filter. So MERV 13 filter is important. Now, this is a MERV 13 filter. It's actually not that like crazy looking or like this high-tech thing, right? It just looked like a very small, very conventional filter. They could be even 1 to 2 inches thick. So they are not like super thick either. Now, the difference between MERV 8, which we talked about earlier, and MERV 13 is like this. Look at the difference. The Y is the efficiency. Higher is better. MERV 13 is just that much more efficient across different sizes of the stuff. Different sizes of the stuff is on the X-axis, right? We talk about the 5 microns and below. So the MERV 13 filter can filtrate much better than the MERV 8 across all the sizes of that spectrum. Now, why do we keep saying you do not need 100% outside air? Because if you have MERV 13, you already turned the corner in terms of cleanliness on your filter. If you have HEPA filter, MERV 15, 16, 14, that's even better. But it's not by a whole lot. Even if you have 100% outside air like that, no matter you are Houston, Chicago, Charlotte, Phoenix, it's only reducing your risk just that much more, not in a significant way. MERV 13 filter already turned the corner, just like that. So you may worry, oh, MERV 13 filter, oh my God, this is going to be causing me a lot of energy because I don't have the fan to deal with it. Now check this out. The above is MERV 5 filter, which is even worse than a MERV 8, but the pressure drop is closely to MERV 13 filter. So MERV 13 filter doesn't mean that there's a lot of pressure drop, doesn't mean that your fan cannot overcome it. You just have to pick the right filter that has the proper pressure drop to it. Now, but be careful though, some of the MERV filter can have a lower efficiency. So make sure you read the MERV 13 filter rating and make sure they're the proper certified MERV 13 filter. And then when you have the multiple MERV 13 filter on your air handling unit, make sure in between them has no cracks. Once you have cracks, those stuff are tiny. It will go right through the cracks, right? So make sure you seal up the between the little gaps and cracks between the filter. You gotta fill it up. You gotta tape it. Make sure there's no small particles can go through it. Otherwise, it will become a MERV 8 filter from a MERV 13 filter. Now, so number one, minimum outside air. Number two, a good filter, MERV 13. Number three, if you cannot do any of the above, you're going to need local filtration, like a room air filter in some of this closet where you have frequent people walk in there, but there's no outside air and no MERV 13 filter. So provide local filtration if required. Now this local filter, usually they come with a CADR, Clean Air Delivery Rate, which tell you what's the square feet of room you can cover. So when you buy one of these cleaner, make sure it is the same amount of area that it can cover in your room. And then the other thing to remember is this CADR usually assume an 8-foot ceiling. So if you have a really high ceiling, 16-foot ceiling, you may want to talk to the manufacturer to look for the proper size unit because they are sized for only 8-foot tall ceiling. Now, the other thing is look for this cleaner that has a HEPA filter. Why is it important? Well, because a lot of this unit, they only come with HEPA filter, and then HEPA filter can filtrate a lot of these elements just like that. So HEPA filter can filtrate all this stuff. But one thing it cannot filter is the gas molecules. So you do not want the HEPA filter to filter the oxygen, the nitrogen, the carbon dioxide, right? You cannot breathe if that's happened. So the gas molecule, like sometimes you smell things, that's the gas molecule. The HEPA filter may not be really good at filtration that you're gonna need carbon filter. But in general, if you have a HEPA filter in your local air cleaning unit, you're good. You can get rid of all those viruses. So the four things to notice is the direction of flow. In the restaurant example we looked at earlier, right? The direction of flow actually helps spread the virus. So look out for that. And the fifth thing here is control. Okay, for example, if you have a furnace system or rooftop system, oftentimes when the air temperature is satisfied, the unit will turn off. So you're not going to able to get that filtration and the outside air to come into your space. So what you want is to, if you have concern that the space could have COVID people in there, then make sure you have the unit on for at least the fan portion to bring in the outside air and filtration of the air. Look, those are the only 5 things you really have to pay attention to. What are they again? Outside air, filter, the direction of flow, and the control. And if you do not have outside air and MERV 13 filter, put in a room air cleaner. Now you do not have to write them down. Slides will come to you. You can look it up again. Just make sure you get those 5 things. Now we're gonna apply them to some space. Oh, actually before we do that, let's look at a few more things. You can use UV light as an enhancement above those 5 things. If there are some concerns that you want to be extra safe, you can put UV light in the ductwork, in the space, upper room UV above the occupants because they are not healthy for people. Or the other thing to need to do is, now remember this, free air changers will eliminate 95% of the contaminants indoor. So let's say if you go to a church service, right? There are 2 services, one after the other. What you may want to do you leave about 3 air changes of air to recirculate through that MERV 13 filter to get you that 95% contaminants. Usually that means about 30 minutes. Same for your conference room. If you have two groups of people, one after the other, you worry about the last group is not clean. Well, guess what? Leave it empty for 30 minutes and let roughly about 3 air change of air to clean up 95% of the air in the space. That will leave the space much safer. Now, the other thing to think about is when the people gone, the the normal occupants gone from an office, doesn't mean that there are nobody there, right? The cleaning crew will have to come in. So make sure your unit is on whenever there are occupied people in the space, not just for the normal occupants, also for the cleaning crew to minimize their risk. There are temperature check too. Temperature check doesn't help you to identify the people who are asymptomatic, but will help you to identify those people as symptomatic because those are the people that are more contagious. And also, if you have a toilet lid, close it. Because what we find in the chart on the left here, they actually find the virus when they flush the toilet, the virus actually re-aerosolized into the air. So you want to make sure if this plume come back out to the toilet, you have a lid to cover it up and don't let it get out of there. So if you have a toilet lid, close it. Now let's look at some application. In this case here, you are outdoor. You have nothing to worry about, right? Because outdoor, well, I mean, you still worry about the 6 feet, but you don't worry about the chance, the possibility of getting infected is much lower because you're outdoor. The 1,000 times rule of 1,000. But what you want to look for is the area of flow. If you have air continuously blowing from the face of a person onto the other, be careful because like the restaurant example, confined space, you can continue to blow the virus from the face of a person onto the other. Well, how about a unit like that? Well, ask the 5 basic questions we have. Does it has minimum outside air? Yes, it does. Does it has MERV 13 filter? Chances are, yeah, it's going to be a little tough whether the through the wall unit can do that. So that may not be a MERV 13 filter. Can you control it to be on all the time? Yes, you can do that. How about the direction of flow? Direction of flow could be an issue here because you might be blowing continuously from the face of person onto the other. So in this case, if that's happened, you may want to think about possibility of providing a local air cleaner with a HEPA filter, right? So the 5 basic rules. So how about this space here? Well, same thing. Do you have outside air? Chances are you may have. Do you have a MERV 13 filter? If you have that, then you're good. You may not need a local air cleaner. But how about the direction of flow? Well, the direction of flow in this case, unlike the sidewall thing we just saw earlier, is mostly from the ceiling down, so it may not be that big of an issue. But take a look if there are continuous flow of air from the face of a person onto the other. Now remember the control thing, right? You want the air to continue to run in a space like that. How about a unit like this? Boy, this is going to be a little bit tricky because number one, it doesn't have outside air. Number two, it doesn't have a MERV 13 filter. Well, you can have the unit continue to run, but given the situation, what you may want to think about is provide a room air cleaner with a HEPA filter, right? So those are some of the smaller space. Well, let's say you are in a larger office building, you have what we call a VAV system. A VAV system can have 100% outside air, meaning like this, no return, then you have nothing to worry about. Usually they do have a MERV 13 filter. In this case, a lot of the building has upgraded it already. But if you have recirculation air like this, then you really want to make sure your filter is a MERV 13, okay, to filtrate the air. Now, actually, this is the study between if you didn't change the filter, still MERV 8 versus MERV 13. The MERV 13 only see 60% of the MERV 8 filters virus after the whole day. So there's almost like a 50% difference in terms of exposure to the whole day. Well, what about you have a dedicated outdoor system like a VRF, radiant ceiling, and all that stuff? Now, if that's the case, you actually seeing similar thing. If you compare to a VAV system with MER13, the DOAS system roughly will see a little bit more virus. The VAV only see about 50%. And the reason is because compared to a DOAS system, both system, VAV or DOAS, has the same amount of outside air. But the VAV system will recirculate a lot more air through the MER13 filter. So a VAV is slightly better. Well, in this case, almost 50% better than a DOAS system. So with that, be careful. The other thing is if there are a lot of particulates in the air, right? If you're cooking, you are smoking, you have space that generate a lot of this aerosol in the air, be careful because it has been found out that the SARS-CoV-2 virus can actually get a ride on these particles and go to longer places. So try to minimize the amount of particles you generate. And if you're going to cook, make sure your exhaust hood are going to be on, minimize the amount of particles in the air. Now, I also want to bring to you the attention that starting in Chicago, the mayor of Chicago start a program and give award to people who come up with ideas in restaurants so they can still dine outdoor this winter. So the idea is maybe we have incentive program, award program to figure out ideas how we gonna able to spend time outdoor and be safe but eat outdoor. Well, how does look like? This is one of the entry they took. They inspired by this Japanese way of eating on the floor, and they come up with idea of this basically this kind of higher wooden tabletop, right? You have this wooden tabletop on the outside and just keep a blanket on top of it so you can sit down underneath the table and eat inside there for the winter as a temporary outdoor solution for this winter for the restaurant to be able to still open for business to get the people back to work, but still allow people to eat safely outdoor. And then another idea is this bubble idea that similar idea, you can still open your business, but allow people to have this semi-conditioned space to able to eat outdoor. And this little kind of booth idea is also similar, but then it's also another entry. So in Colorado, they started a program to figure out this competition with the architects and the restaurant to figure out how we're gonna, even maybe this winter, we may have more cases, but we can have innovative ideas to get people back to the restaurant, get the workers back to the places where they used to work to continue the business to have a more fun winter. Now, finally, I want to touch on other stuff. They're emerging technology. In this case, they have the UVC lamp, the far UV light, and all these other things. Now, those emerging technology also including some of this stuff you probably heard about it, bipolar ionization, vaporized hydrogen peroxide, pulsed xenon, and photocatalytic oxidation. Also stuff are emerging. So what do you do with this technology? Number one, check if CDC approved them. You will find out CDC hasn't approved a lot of them. What did the EPA say about that? And that's number two. Number three is do they have actually proof from labs, from field tests that this stuff actually work? Number four is do they have research indicating this stuff do not harm people? So with that, those are the four things you can hold on to evaluate this technology. So in summary, what we did today was we look at some of the research, and then we look at how we winterize our building. And remember, now you're a little HVAC expert, right? What are the 5 things again? Make sure you got outside air. Make sure you got MER13 filter or above. If you don't have those, or if you have concern of the local elements, put in a local air filter. Now remember the control, right? If the unit stop, you're not going to get outside air, you're not going to get filtration. And so like those are some of the measures. And the flow direction is the fifth one, right? Make sure air don't flow on the face of a person to the other. So you are a little HVAC expert now. And also remember, there are new technology out there, but there are 4 ways you can evaluate this technology to make sure they are good. With that, if you have more questions, we can talk about it now, or you can email to S-Ray website later. Thank you for your time, and let's have more fun this winter.
Thank you, Luke. We do have a few questions for you. So the first section, you were talking about the humidity levels with the virus. One of the questions we got is, should we get warm air humidifiers or cool air humidifiers?
Hmm. The key there is to actually to have the proper humidification. So warm or cool air, I do not know whether there's a major difference. So as long as you get the proper humidification, is good.
Great. So another question that we got was, when you spray down or disinfect a surface, how long does it take for the virus to die or go away?
Yeah, there are many there are different things to look at it. You probably seen a lot of this different study on the virus survival time, because a lot of that has to do with the temperature and humidity too, just like what you saw earlier in the presentation. So depending on what they are, they can survive up to from hours to days. Some of them, even like multiple days. And if in a refrigerator condition, it could be like weeks. So depending on what surfaces, what temperature, they vary greatly. But if it's, let's say, if a typical office condition, right? The current CDC guideline is what you want to do. Let's say if the COVID person used the space, right? What you want to do is wait for 24 hours and then clean it up, and then you are good. That's per the current CDC guideline.
Great. We have another question with regards to the MERV 13 filters. The question is, how is the maintenance issue of MERV 13 filters?
Yeah, the MERV 13 filter, as time goes by, it will get dirty and accumulate with stuff. Now, depending on what you are, most of the people that use 2-inch MERV 13 filter, they replace it maybe, couple months, then they will replace it. But if you have the one inch MERV 13 filter, they need more replacement, maybe in the range of a month or so. But the key there is you can look at their pressure drop. If the pressure drop start getting high, then that means they are loaded with elements. Now remember, one of the reasons why we show you this virus can get into the HVAC system is when you change the filter, when you try to clean the ductwork, remember that potential, these stuffs are there. You need to wear your protection, personal PPE, and make sure you protect yourself when you try to change the filter, right? Because that potentially can be elements in there, and we don't know whether they are still active or not.
So we do have another question that says, do you have any specific recommendation for schools and school teachers? So many schools in Arkansas are of different ages with different technology.
Yeah, that's actually couple guidelines out there. S-Ray has a school guideline which is pretty comprehensive about many things that you can do. And Joseph Allen also has from Harvard also has his own guidelines here. But the fundamental really doesn't change that much. Number one is you gotta make sure you have outside air. In this case, the school has more people. The outside air amount usually is more. And oftentimes in a school, what we've been finding out is due to maintenance issue, the outside air damper oftentimes are not positioned correctly, right? So make sure you got enough outside air. Make sure you got MERV 13 filter. Check out those airflow position. If you have airflow from one side of the classroom vertically on the wall, blow through people onto the other, then you gotta be worried about that, right? And then if you have concern about anything, put in a local air filtration system. And if the unit on and stop and on and that sort of thing, make sure they are running continuously. Um, at least when there are people in there, you may want to make sure the filters running the outside air is there. Oh, also in between classes, if you worry about the class before has COVID people, you may want to leave the classroom empty for about 30 minutes to get a little bit of clean air in there before the second class come in.
So another question regarding to the MERV filter, how does the higher MERV filter affect the unit efficiency?
So that's the issue. Exactly. Great question. Love it. Why is that? Why do X-ray don't recommend you everybody go HEPA filter, right? It's a better performing filter. The problem is once you go beyond MERV 13, the pressure start increasing. So let's say if you get HEPA filter, right? The pressure is actually really high. It could potentially decrease the amount of air you can get into the space. As a result, you got less air circulating through the filter, and people may not be comfortable, too cold, too warm, whatever. So you really have to be careful. If you want to go to a high grade filter, you have to make sure, talk with a technician, talk with somebody that deal with those units to see they have enough juice to push through the filter.
Great answer. So we have another question with regards to humidity. If higher humidity accelerates the degradation of the virus, why did we experience such a spike in cases over the summer months, especially here in the South?
So that great question. That was one of the factors that impact the transmission of the virus is humidity. There are also many things. Well, I mean, your question is very legitimate, right? Summertime we have high temperature, high UV light too. Humidity is so important. Why there are so many cases of infection? It turned out those environment issue is one of the holistic factors that infect it. If we not mass is actually quite important, as you see in this example. We didn't even measure, we didn't even model a 95% an N95 mass. We model a closed mass of 50% in an office. It reduced the infection rate by almost 75%. So we have only 25% of the infection rate. So if people go to restaurant, confined places with no mask, no protection, it's going to be a little tricky. Now, I don't know the situation in every single one of them, but I know in Florida, for example, a lot of those things happen to younger people. When we are younger, I guess we feel we are strong, and maybe we are less concerned about the mask in some of the bars and restaurants. And there's a lot of those cases pop up with the people were not protecting themselves in close distance. Now remember, at the end of the day, this is an infection disease. It's infected through people. And within 6 feet, that is still the dominating infection. If you're not wearing mask within six feet, by 15 minutes you're doing that, it's gonna be a little tricky.
Okay, we have time for just a couple more questions. Remember that if you have more questions, please continue to type them in our Q&A. We will definitely make sure that we get those addressed either by Luke or our speaker tomorrow, Elliot, because I think some of them definitely are going to be answered tomorrow as well. But we've got another one with regards to humidity. So higher temperatures and increased humidity tends to encourage mold to grow. How do you increase these two things without creating an environment for mold?
That is a great question. Yes, I mean, hey, I live in Chicago. 40% humidity in the winter. Oh my Lord, you're gonna see this condensation on the window. So you have to be really careful on, that's why when we show the example now in my office last winter in Chicago, the relative humidity is actually roughly about 30 to 35%. That's why I show an example of 35%, because when you have people in there, you could potentially get to that level. But a few things to note to do. Number one is make sure condensation doesn't happen inside the space. Look at the dew point, look at the thing. You may want to put in the humidifier, humidification sensor to make sure that doesn't happen. The other thing is, if you cannot do that, right, make it localized. Just put in humidifier for the people that are, where the people are, and just local humidify it. Now, this is not an easy question to answer because it is a very difficult thing to do in the northern climate, especially when you have higher humidity and you're gonna have condensation on the window. But potentially it's the local humidification that can help, especially on the people that are more vulnerable to the situation.
Great answers. Well, thank you, Luke, for that informative presentation. Thanks again to all of our attendees and for their questions. For those of you that we weren't able to get to your question during this time, we will definitely try and get those answers to you and post those on our UAMS School of Public Health website for the link, along with the video when that's available. But please join us again tomorrow. Our speaker will be Dr. Elliot Gall from Portland State University. Dr. Gall's presentation will focus on the COVID-19 virus, or how the COVID-19 virus affects indoor air quality, which further explains the need for the mitigation strategies that Luke covered today. Again, on Thursday, we won't have our presentation on Wednesday due to the Veterans Day holiday, but our third presentation will be on Thursday. And I'll be presenting on how to develop resilience in yourself during these trying times and how to support others around you. Be well, and we hope to see you back tomorrow. Thank you all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Cindy, this is AV support here.
Hey.
Hey, everything seemed to go well.
Yeah, so how do we capture, because there's some of these questions that are on here that I definitely think I'd like to send to Elliot because I think they're more appropriate for him to answer tomorrow. So I want to make sure we capture all the questions that we didn't get to today. How do we do that?
That has to be done in post. I'll go and get the printout for those, or I'll email them to you.
Yeah, it seems to be both in the Q&A and in the chat. Some people weren't using the Q&A.
Yeah, I think we can get both the chat and the Q&A reports. So I'll get those to you as soon as I can get them downloaded.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for your help and support today.